1, 2, 3.
Hello and welcome to In the Studio. I'm Redbeard, bringing you the stories behind the greatest rock and roll albums in history. Today we go in the studio for the formation and launch of one of the greatest American bands ever.
Being in this band, it's to say that there's a dream come true to become famous, to have an album out, and get your voice on your songs played on the radio is a real trip. It's a dream come true, in many respects.
The thing about rock and roll, it was still suffering the rap from the 50s of it being race music and being the devil's music, and Elvis Presley with long sideburns and shaking his hips and all that stuff that went along with it. Rock and roll, and Chuck Berry, God, he was black. And making this music, it scared the crap out of everybody. So of course, for us, in owning this music and then having some hair was really, it's pretty shocking to our parents.
I'm Tyler, and you're in the studio with the bad boys in Aerosmith.
Band Aerosmith is the stuff of rock and roll legend. It's approaching a cliche to point out once again how Joe Perry, Tom Hamilton, Brad Whitford, Joey Kramer, and Steven Tyler of Aerosmith would rise throughout the 70s, fall in the early and mid-80s, only to rise again to even greater heights. Or, as writer David Wild so bluntly put it, quote, Aerosmith got it all, then they lost it all, then they got it all back again, end quote. And all the while creating some of the greatest rock music ever, becoming a true national treasure. As we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the release of Aerosmith's very first album, I assembled singer Steven Tyler, guitarist Joe Perry, and bass player Tom Hamilton in the studio to reminisce, just as they've done in the Aerosmith autobiography, Walk This Way, with veteran rock biographer Stephen Davis. Before he ever thought of adopting the stage surname Tyler, Aerosmith's frontman was swaddled by music in the Tallarico household. I asked Steven Tyler about his father.
Because most people are bitching about how they had lousy childhoods, and underneath their father or parents' thumb, I literally grew up under the piano. He was a Juilliard graduate and a classical musician all the way, so I got to listen to all those sonatas and Bach and Beethoven and Brahms and Debussy, and it was kind of that's where my passion for music came from, was in the notes. No one had to tell me. I'm Italian here, you know what I'm talking about? Got a lot of hugs and kisses, and I just thought it was interesting to bring that up, because I followed in his footsteps. My father's father, they came over from Italy, as you know, and they, in the 20s and 30s, literally got on a train and would come out to Ohio. I've got this little brochure of them in 1923, getting on a train from New York City, going out to Ohio and playing, as we would do on tour. But the big El Grande hotels back then, chamber music, as it would be, as opposed to Marshalls today. That's what they did, and I guess they passed that on to me. My father always said, make sure you have something to fall back on, and that's why I strapped a pillow to my ass for so many years. But I didn't want to be a piano tuner or any of that stuff. My uncle took care of New York. And I just, became a rape and pillage and vagabond in the rock and roll thing. Always did it. We started in New York City because we lived outside of it. And then eventually got out of the club scene because it was 4 sets a night, ripping my throat apart and going up to Bones Gate at Dartmouth, as Tom Hamilton would say. Dartmouth High School, college. And, for $300 a night, as opposed to $175 for 4 sets. So, it was a good little, going back from where it all came from.
Aerosmith's debut, recorded 25 years ago, that's Mamakin, a song Steven Tyler believed in so strongly that he had the title tattooed on his arm. Steven found melody and harmony under his father's piano, but the inspiration to perform came from his uncle's wife.
My Aunt Phyllis is my father's brother's wife, she just was, a very short, chesty, feisty Italian woman that took care of Friday nights, sing-alongs and all that stuff as a kid, like camp stuff that we did at my parents' resort when they moved over from Italy. We went up and bought 400 acres, 350 acres, for $15,000 or something in the year 1918 or whenever when they came over. And so when I was a kid, we went up to this quote-unquote resort, which was just, bed and breakfast type thing and small cabins. But she would take care of the Friday night sing-alongs, John Jacob Jingleheimer Smith, and There's a Hole in the Bucket, and we put little skits on. And she was the one that taught us all how to sing, and I did this little skit called Animal Crackers where I mimed. So, I mean, I give her credit. She loved me a lot, and she's passed away since. But when I think about my childhood, I think about my father's, piano and my Aunt Phyllis, and, take me back.
In quite a contrast to Steven Tyler's home life, Aerosmith bass player Tom Hamilton reveals the source of his skill set for being, as Brad Whitford once told me, quote, the voice of reason in the band. Here's Tom Hamilton of Aerosmith.
Well, my father was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. And
says it all right there, don't it, partner?
Oh, yeah. But he was a dive bomber pilot in World War II in Burma, and way into aviation and, interesting, fascinating machinery, cars and stuff like that. And so I was always inspired by that, by the thought of, my father flying these planes in combat and stuff. And, I think that in that period of time, most people's fathers were doing incredible things, adventurous, dangerous, things. And so I was always inspired by that. And but he was very much, he became a lieutenant colonel at some point because he's probably got a knack for controlling things, And so he was very much into what's reasonable, how you should act. So that part of it, even though I resisted it, and when I was a teenager, and got into a lot of trouble, and did everything to kind of be on the other side of that. Some of that is just ingrained. I suppose it's not the greatest personality trait for this business, but it comes in handy, I guess.
Smith's Movin' Out. It's the first song ever written together by Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. Perry and Tom Hamilton had a band together when only teenagers, and one night off they went to see another band playing Lake Sunapee, New Hampshire. What they saw in the then drummer and singer Steven Tallarico would alter their lives forever. First, Tom Hamilton, then Joe Perry of Aerosmith.
Well, I think a lot of people know that there was this club up in New Hampshire called The Barn, which is where all the bands would play that were good bands. And, there was this one famous band that would come up from New York and play there called The Strangers with this singer, Steven. So Joe and I went over there to, hopefully go and see him, and we couldn't get in. The place was packed, and there was just no way we could get in. And so we sat outside and listened, and it was really amazing. But then I remember another show up at this ski area called King Ridge, and that's when the band was called The Chain Reaction. And they opened with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. They had originals, but they did a lot of other stuff too. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this guy is incredible, and this probably sounds better than the way the Beatles would do it. It was really amazing. It was like you could really see that, it was a whole level above any of the other bands around there.
Especially ours.
Yeah.
Because Tom and I were playing in a band together. We were, working together and just we were jamming, but our musical taste tended to, I don't want to put a qualitative, label on anything, but, we were into the MC5 and Fleetwood Mac and the Yardbirds and, just loud and raunchy rock and roll, which was our, stock and trade for our little band of, we had a drummer and we would just flail and then of course Steven's band, it was
we did
famous
stupid
for
stuff
their,
like Train Kept a Rollin' and
you guys did, and that was the common ground. Everybody that gets together with a band, with other guys, there's always one or two songs that hook them in. There's commonality of taste, at least in one place, and that was where our bands joined. Steven's band played the Yardbirds song, Train Kept a Rolling, and we played it. So, you know, there was that one place where the two spheres or the two orbits met, you know, and that summer, over a couple of summers, you know, like we knew him, he would come up, and, you know, I can remember one summer everybody was all excited because they had a single on the jukebox called The Sun. And it was like, whoa, there's a single. They have a single out. They have a record deal and all that. So, I mean, they were Stephen was, I mean, they were writing their own songs and stuff. They were way ahead of what we were doing. I mean, we were 16 years old, you know. And then one summer, as we talked about in the book, Stephen was leaving that band and he needed an audition tape for it. I guess he was going to, like, send a tape to Jeff Beck or something. And we played backup on a song called I'm Down, a Beatles song. And then we started jamming. And then later that summer, we decided to hook up in New York, or in Boston, you know. And, you know, over a couple of months, Stephen decided he wanted to step out from behind the drums and get out in front again, you know.
Not long after, Steven Tyler would see Joe Perry perform with Tom Hamilton in their band, and the rest, as they say, is history. But even before Aerosmith formed, Steven Tyler had been approached to go solo by a veteran pop music manager. Even though Steven seemingly was bent on superstardom, he passed on that opportunity. I asked Steven Tyler why.
The difference between our bands and the other bands at the time that didn't make it was that we searched out Palisades Park and would play there for free Saturday afternoons at the WMCA Good Guy shows with Scott Muni for free at the Jewish Center. And so I got a chance to see what big time was like from small time. I was still on the same stage, even though nobody showed up. You know, I got a sense of what it was like, you know, and a taste for it. Loyalty, yeah. I mean, when you're in a band, it's a real thick, warm overcoat. Because, you know, I went from the Maniacs to the Chain Reaction to the Chain to William Proud to all these different bands. And, you know, it was like, I mean, it was very scary when Joe and Brad left. You know, it brought up abandonment issues from being in bands in the old days and how hard it is to make it, have anybody show up at all. I remember in the beginning with Aerosmith playing for beer, and nobody showed up, and we would argue with the club owners, what are we playing for? There's nobody here. So yes, back then it was very comforting to know that you were in a band, and I didn't want to be taken, you know, off and brought around and having some background singers and some people. You know, it just didn't feel right.